what happens with tacit bullying is we find things like learned helplessness. I don't know whether you know what learned helplessness is. It's a fascinating topic. And I really want you to take a little bit of time to think about learned helplessness. The idea of learned helplessness, it was given to us by a guy called Seligman in, I always get this wrong, 1967 or 1968. And learned helplessness is essentially, if you learn that you can't do something, then the next time somebody gives you that task, you aren't able to do it. A very simple example of learned helplessness is, has anybody ever done a Where's Wally test? You've seen Where's Wally? And when you look at the first Where's Wally thing, you go, I can't find Wally. And then someone gives you another Where's Wally. You go, no, I can't find Wally. By the third time of giving you Where's Wally, you go, I'm not very good at this. You've already told yourself you're not very good at it. And you back off cognitively. You back off. This is learned helplessness. The example here is of the elephant. Why do bull elephants find themselves unable to escape from these tiny little ropes that they're given? Well, when they're kids, when they're little calves, they're tied to these ropes and tied to these posts, and they can't escape. And they learn that they can't escape. And by the time they become massive and strong, they believe they can't escape, so they don't escape. And that's the same that happens with kids. Learned helplessness is a massive thing. They feel like failures. They find that their coping resources are unbalanced. Their self-esteem goes. They feel hopeless. There is a sense of punishment. If you can't do something, every time you get your results, every time you get your grades, it's like being punished. Every single time I got a 9% in an exam, and it happened. It felt humiliating. I was shamed in front of the rest of the class. Every time everybody else was getting 60, 50% in tests, and I was getting 15, 10, 5% in tests, I was shamed in front of them. Every time the school prizes were handed out and I didn't get one, I was shamed in front of them. Every time the teacher pointed to me and asked me why I hadn't done something, I was shamed. And that's the kind of forms of punishment. If you went to school when I did, you were also thrashed regularly. It doesn't happen in schools these days, thank goodness, but there are all sorts of ways we punish kids, even today. And there is a loop, a vicious circle between results, competence, and appreciation. There is a vicious circle. They feed from each other. If you are not appreciated, you become less competent. If you become less competent, your results fall. If your results fall, you become less appreciated. There is a feedback loop. And finally, the Matthew effect. Just a thumb if you've heard of the Matthew effect. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Comes from the parable of the minas, from the Gospel of St. Matthew. Not that you need to know that, but we know the Matthew effect as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And this happens in school with dyslexics all the time. So let's just explain it like this. Imagine every lesson, or every hour, not every lesson, a dyslexic learns a unit of knowledge, because you have to read and you have to remember in your working memory. So you've got this read, learn, inwardly digest, and use your working memory and use your phonological processing. So every single lesson, a dyslexic earns or learns a unit of knowledge. And by the end of the week, you can see how many units of knowledge she has learned. Well, non-dyslexic students, they don't have these working memory problems. They don't have these phonological processing problems. So every lesson, they learn 2 units of knowledge. And from these, they learn 2 more and 2 more. And you can see very simply that if you're learning 2 units of knowledge per lesson, as opposed to 1 unit of knowledge per lesson, then you are going to greatly increase the distance between how much you know and how much the dyslexic knows. So dyslexics fall further and further behind, depending on how we teach them. If we teach them through reading and through remembering, dyslexics always fall further and further behind. It's like if you have 10 euros and your neighbor has 100 euros, and then everybody increases their wealth by 10%, your neighbor has 110 euros and you have 11 euros. The gap has grown. Exactly the same with, as it were, units of knowledge. This is called the Matthew effect. This happens in school all the time. And it's something I like talking about. I did a video on this, on dyslexia and intelligence. And there are all sorts of rubrics by which you can show dyslexics are generally more intelligent than non-dyslexics. But on the other hand, one of the ways we measure intelligence is your ability to connect units of knowledge. But if you don't have as many units of knowledge to connect, then your opportunities for showing this intelligence are reduced. And so this is a form of tacit bullying. It's a form of knowing what we're doing and crushing people through the education system.